watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Goal Line Extended on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. Today is Friday, May 14, and I'm your host, Ryan Boswell. Glad that you could join us as we look ahead to the opening weekend of May Madness as the 2021 Men's and Women's NCAA Division I Championships are set to get underway, and we could not be more excited. Today, I'll be joined by Ncaa as we'll be looking ahead to the matchups and what to watch as we head into the first weekend of this tournament. Liam will be joining me very shortly. And then after Liam and I are done teeing up this weekend's games, I'll be joined by Archers midfielder Tom Schreiber as he prepares for this summer, hopefully in front of packed stadiums as the league returns to its tour-based model. And then some new faces that he'll be seeing in the Archers locker room come training camp at the end of this month. He gave us his outlook on the upcoming season. Obviously, very excited for what is to come with his Archers team. And then the Toronto Rock, his NLL team, are also fresh off their announcement that home games will now be played in Hamilton. So he gave us his reaction to that news as the NLL plans to get the 2021-2022 season started the first weekend of December. So Tom will be joining us in a little bit. And then after Tom and I are done talking about the Archers, I'll be joined by Jordan Johnson, Flash reporter and analyst, as we continue our 2021 PLL season previews with the Archers. Jordan will be breaking down what he thinks their roster will look like out of training camp and what roles he expects certain guys to fill, especially with all the new additions to this team as Coach Bates looks to get over the hump here to get to the playoffs and then to get to that championship game, something that he has not been able to do here in the first two seasons with the PLL. Again, Jordan will be joining me at the end of the show, so make sure to stick around for that. And his article on the Archers will be up on the Flash site sometime today, so keep an eye out for that. Follow Lacrosse Flash on Instagram and Twitter so that you do not miss that. As I welcome in Liam Kelly to today's show as we look ahead to the first round of the 2021 NCAA Division I Men's Lacrosse Tournament. Liam, what's going on, my man?
How we doing, Ryan?
I'm doing great. Very excited as we look ahead to a very exciting weekend that we are looking forward to, beginning tomorrow at noon Eastern. But before we get to these matchups, some news that we got just over the week, kind of during this past week, and they got a lot of people talking on the internet after that story was reported by Inside Lacrosse's Terry Foy yesterday morning. It brought up a mandate by the NCAA for this year's tournament, a new mandate, pretty much outlining their decision to limit team benches to 45 members, and counting towards that limit is every coach and staff member on the sideline. It's a COVID mandate implemented, unfortunately, during a time where we are still fighting this virus, but a bummer for a lot of players who, especially in this year where there were so many guys who got extra years and then transfers came in along with a new freshman class. There were very, very large team rosters, and coaches will be forced to choose who will and then who won't be able to travel and support the team on the field. And then even coaches, as Duke head coach John Danowski in that Inside Lacrosse article said, it'll be himself, his assistant coaches, 3 of his assistant coaches, and then an athletic trainer so that he can bring with him 40 players on the sideline. So definitely a wrinkle into some of the plans that these teams might have had in terms of personnel. But unfortunate to say the least for the guys that won't be able to support their teams on the sideline, especially for those that may not even be able to make the trip at all.
Yeah, it's kind of on par with how the NCAA has made some of their decisions, which has been a lack of foresight, a lack of thinking, especially into a time where we're trying to progress back to feeling a bit more normal. You want that sense of normalcy to be commonplace. You want people to feel positive and like we're moving in a good direction with everything we've seen over the last, 15 months at this point. And we're just not getting that. You saw the NCAA, they canceled the women's golf championship because the course was playable, but not at a championship level. That's just the NCAA just showing that there's more issues within themselves than with what's going on. We've seen the NCAA football championships. We've seen much, much larger rosters be on sidelines and it being approved. And for lacrosse to not be allowed at this point, it just doesn't make sense. It just makes you feel bad for those depth guys that might not get to be on a sideline now. You got scout team guys that have made all their sacrifices all year long, but haven't seen it pay out to playing time at this point. maybe not this year, but next year or the year after, who knows? Those guys can't be on a sideline. And how many of these programs are not going to get back here in their time at a school? You have Drexel, for instance. This is their second tourney appearance, their last being 2014. Those guys, this is a lifetime achievement type thing just to be there and in this situation, and they are hurt by it. And it's a tough look for a lot of parties involved, and you just hate to see it. So it's a big shot for the lacrosse community right now. So it's unfortunate.
It's definitely unfortunate just for these guys, as you're saying, scout team players who, they coming into the season knew that they weren't going to get a chance to play on the field during games, but they're, busting their butt all season long during practices, during meetings, during those film sessions, trying to help their team be better. And now kind of unfortunate, kind of like a kick in the side that they're not able to travel and support their teammates, their classmates, you name it. On the field, kind of very unfortunate. But the NCAA, they've always mandated a maximum of 40 players dressed on the sideline with 32 eligible to play. But referencing the context of that article again, most coaches saying that in a normal year, they're permitted to travel their whole roster with them. And then, they've had no issues in terms of getting guys on the field to support. So we'll see how this story plays out into the weekend. I can't imagine the NCAA changing this mandate, just obviously tough. Obviously, from that article, a lot of coaches saying that they heard this news Monday, conference call on Monday, kind of getting all the information on this tournament. Then they found out this news this past Monday. So that's kind of tough to hear. Definitely tough news there for those players. But just another instance here where the NCAA seems to just be coming up short, not looking too good in the public's eye, as you were saying before, with the women's golf situation that just played out. Tough to say the least in terms of how the NCAA has been operating recently, but we'll see how it impacts this year's tournament. Expect much smaller sidelines, though, than what we are accustomed to on the sideline. And some other big news that we got during the week before we get to talking about this weekend's slate of games. Villanova Attackman Keegan has entered the NCAA's transfer portal as a grad student after doing a post-grad year at the Hill Academy in Canada. He went on to start all 50 games of his Villanova career, leading the team in points in each of his 3 seasons and being named a 2-time All-Big East selection. He finishes his Nova career with 179 points, good for 5th all-time in Villanova history. And the early expectation is that Khan will be one of the top targets when it comes to attackmen available in this summer's transfer portal. We've seen it especially this season with all the transfers happening after the NCAA awarded the extra year of eligibility, whether it be Mike Sowers, Charlie Bertrand, Will York, the Kurtz brothers, Mike Adler. We saw with Chris Gray in 2020 an almost seamless transition to the University of North Carolina from BU. So we've seen a handful of guys be really successful fresh off a transfer to a big or even a bigger D1 program than the one they're currently at. Where do you see a guy like Khan and his skill set fitting in?
Well, he's an ACC level talent. He's a guy who could come into a program like a Syracuse and probably start from day one. He's a guy that will be drawing a lot of attention from coaches everywhere. There's 2 ways that I think that this could play out. I think the first and more likely of the scenarios is that he ends up in the ACC. You have a Duke that's going to need to replace Michael Sowers. And I'm not saying that he is a Michael Sowers, but he is a guy who can come in and contribute, especially with the program, with the level of talent just across the board. He can come in and be a big-time player with a lot of minutes at a team that is more likely to win a national championship than where he is in Villanova. He could go to UNC and pair with Chris Gray for his last season, and that would be amazing too. He's going to get tons of time, tons of points, and be a very strong second option for a UNC team. That being said, he could go to Q's. I don't know what the situation is going to happen with Q's, how all the Scanlon fallback is going to happen, but he can go in and be a day one starter for an ACC program. And then the second option, which is less likely, but also something I could see him happening, is maybe he goes to somewhere like a High Point, a team that has won a conference championship this year, a team that could pair him with an Asher Nolting style player who is phenomenal in his own right. They got some younger guys like the Mayeas and those talents that also will continue to bring you to a conference championship year in and year out. for their duration of time there, and maybe go that way to try and just get his foot in the door. Now, like I said, that's less likely. That's not something you'd see. If he's going somewhere other than the ACC, it's got to be big. So it's got to be a Patriot League champ. It wouldn't be Denver because that's within the same conference. That wouldn't happen. But, it's significant. I really think we'll see him on an ACC roster next year.
Definitely a few prominent stops where a player with Keegan Khan's skill set could fit, possibly, and as we're saying, most likely to one of these teams that we'll see this weekend, most likely one of those ACC teams. As you were talking, I did think Denver. I said, Denver added some Ivy League, some Yale attackmen this offseason through that transfer portal, but then you did bring up that he is a Villanova guy. I wouldn't imagine him jumping ship there from Villanova to Denver. So Definitely thinking one of these ACC teams, maybe a Big Ten, maybe like a Maryland, but we will see something that we will follow along into the summer. But let's kick off our 2021 NCAA tournament coverage for the day. The North Carolina Tar Heels, the number 1 seed, will host the MAC champs Monmouth. That game scheduled for tomorrow, Saturday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Again, all A games this weekend live on ESPNU. But UNC, we talked about them all year. The co-ACC champs, they're one of the best teams in the country. But the one area that they do struggle, the face-off X, Zach Tucci, 58% on the season. Andrew Thierryar is at 53%. So not terrible numbers at all, both on the plus side of 50. But they'll be going up against Matt Sutar, who's won 71% of his draws this season. So we'll see if that plays a role in this one. But North Carolina is expected to score, and they're expected to score often. So we'll see what Monmouth can do to try to slow them down and manage that clock in their possessions.
Yeah, Monmouth statistically is actually they're up there. They're one of the top teams defensively in the entire country. I don't know if that might be exposed as who they've been playing this year, or if they really are that good. We've seen them beat teams and do it convincingly. Obviously, they're MAC champions for a reason, but like you said, UNC it's a scary offense for most teams, really almost any team in the country, and this is going to be a next level test for them. Even with extra possessions at the stripe, it's going to be against bigger, stronger ACC athletes. It's going to be against guys that have been playing defense against Michael Sowers and, UVA and Q's and all those level guys. Like, this is going to be a team you got to bring your A game. It's not a likely win, but if they can make a push, they can make it competitive, and that's just what you hope for in one of these, number 1 versus number 16 seed type games.
Absolutely. They're hoping for Monmouth to keep it close here. Obviously, North Carolina weathered so far through the storm, through their ACC gauntlet of a schedule that they had to play. Monmouth, not as much, but North Carolina and Monmouth, the first of our quadruple header here on Saturday, so definitely looking forward to it. Let's move on. We're going to bounce around a little bit here, not exactly go in order. We're going to move right on, though, to the 2 seed Duke. They host High Point at 5 p.m. Eastern on Sunday afternoon. The other co-ACC champion, set for a rematch with the SoCon champion as High Point beat Richmond last Friday. But like I said, this is a rematch. These two teams met back a little over 2 months ago, March 10th, and Duke ran away with it. They put up 27 goals on the Panthers in a 21-point game. So hoping for a much closer game in this one. Obviously, the Panthers, we as fans hoping for a much closer game. But how does High Point keep it close, and what are you watching for from the Blue Devils in this one?
Well, you're looking for Duke, it's an easy answer. You're looking for the same consistency they've had all year. They've lost to Notre Dame and UNC, and not by a lot. So that's going to be a tough test, playing, a rematch against a team that isn't really losing many games, has a lot of confidence, and has a lot of talent. From the High Point side, you got your kind of senior core of guys on the offensive side of the field. You got your Asher Nolting, who is a senior, but he has got another extra year of eligibility. You got Kevin Rogers, who was the transfer in, who's been phenomenal. And you got Dalton Sulver through the midfield. Sulver is a big, strong kid out of Texas with heavy shot. And he's a very vocal guy. You've seen him on the sidelines chirping, seen him on the field chirping after goals. So if those 3 guys in particular, I think if they can kind of keep everybody's attention focused and forward, then they'll play a tight game. this High Point team's played 5 ACC games, 4 on paper, and then a UNC scrimmage as well that isn't on their stats. But that's a good, tough test that has led them to, they're on a 6-game win streak right now, including beating Richmond, which wasn't predicted by a ton of people. So there is experience there. They've beaten big teams the past few years. They've played Duke to close games. They've played Virginia close. They've beaten some of those ACC games, ACC teams in tight games. So they're not expected to win, but they can do it. They have some talent that can get you a win. But this is, again, it's Duke, and it's Michael Sowers Duke, Brennan O'Neill Duke, depth across the board. Jake Naso at the face-off stripe. Again, he's got an edge, I think, against the High Point face-off guys right now. So it'll be tough. It'll be a hard win for High Point.
Like Monmouth, High Point, the 15 seed, so not expecting them to win, but obviously hoping they keep the game close, and like you said, hoping they bring the energy, as with the limited roster sizes, with the limited sidelines, we're hoping to hear a lot of energy there from the sidelines regardless. But Duke, led by number 2 overall pick Michael Sowers, looking to continue their 2021 season, as is the University of Virginia, as they host Bryant, the NEC champs. But what a story for the Bryant Bulldogs. They've battled through multiple COVID spikes, a few season-ending injuries to pretty significant players on this team, and then Mark O'Rourke battling myocarditis since the fall, finally given the go-ahead to suit up and play here towards the end of the season. He's played a major impact in Bryant's conference championship success. What excites you about this one, Virginia and Bryant?
Well, like you said, that late season push after all the adversity, you kind of want a team going into a national tournament, especially in that little 4-game gauntlet that has faced adversity. I wouldn't want to be a team coming in that was undefeated. Doesn't matter if I'm a Duke or if I'm a High Point, just to use those teams as examples. I want a team that's lost. I want a team that's had to fight back, and I want a team that's had to overcome. And this Bryant team has done that in various aspects, and they're competitive. They're 9-3. Like you said, Mark O'Rourke is back. Logan McGovern has been there. He's a stud. And Mike Pressler's their head coach. At Bellarmine, when I was there, we played against the Mike Pressler team, and they pumped us. And it was not fun to watch, and they were great across the board. Face-offs, goaltending, defense, offense. He knows how to prepare. He's that coach who's done it before. They're going to be competitive regardless of what their season looked like and what their schedule looked like. So they'll be scrappy, and it'll make it hard for UVA. Now, Lars and Bryant has history from when he was up at Brown. They played a lot, but, it's a UVA team with a lot of firepower. They have Petey LaSalle to give them possessions. They have guys that can score, and they have guys that can stop. They got midfielders that can play both sides of the ball, and they're going to be competitive. But this is going to be an exciting game to watch. I'm really looking forward to this one.
Absolutely. UVA and the Bryant Bulldogs. The first game on Sunday afternoon at noon Eastern, a pretty solid way to kick off your Sunday. Definitely looking forward to that one. And following Virginia and Bryant will be the undefeated Maryland Terrapins, the 3 seed in this tournament, and the America East champ Vermont. That game scheduled for 2:30 on Sunday afternoon. For Maryland, this will be their first out-of-conference action of the season. It's not the ACC or the Big East, but do not look past the Vermont Catamounts. Out of all the quote-unquote mid-major conference champions outside the Big East, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Patriot League, this game looks like the one with upset written all over it. I know you just talked a lot there about Bryant and really liking Bryant, but I think this one, Vermont, coming in against Maryland, who has not played out of conference yet this season, I think this is one that I have upset written on. How do you feel about this one?
I'm gonna have to go against you with that one. I got Maryland coming out on top, but all right. You're right. The America East has been scrappy all year. Albany was a really tough team to beat, and they beat them 3 times. That says a lot to, one, their consistency and being able to beat strong teams and competitive teams. And it also says that they're not going to back down when they're tested. The America East historically has not been the strongest. maybe barring the Albany, Thompson runs, at least not for the last 6 or 7 years. But that being said, Vermont can score and they can push tempo. They can get after it in transition, and they can be competitive. We don't know what Maryland's going to do against different competition, but if I had to guess, it's going to be more of the same. Wisnauskas and Bernhardt have been all over the field doing everything. Bernhardt put up 10 points his last game against a very good Hopkins. No, that was in the semifinal, but still, he's been Bernhardt. It's just, I don't know if the America East is the team to stop the Big Ten. Not right now. Vermont is great, and I don't want to slight them, but Maryland is another level. They should have been a 2 or a 1 seed. I don't know how they got the 3.
Okay, so me and Harrison on Tuesday's show both kind of agreed that we could see the reasoning for Duke and North Carolina obviously jumping Maryland falling a little bit, especially with the game against Johns Hopkins being that it was close. You're on the other side of that.
I definitely appreciated the committee coming out and standing by their reasoning, but at the same time, I think that the best player on the undefeated team in the country, regardless of just playing a Big Ten slate, I think there's no way that you can put 2 teams ahead of them. I think there has to be a definitive ACC team, and then I don't think that you just leave it at, no, it's still the ACC, so it's just there. But there's going to be arguments both ways. So I personally would have liked to see UNC and then Maryland after UNC beat Duke by 3, but that's just me.
Definitely tough with being that they were the co-ACC champs. Pretty much, I feel like if you were to think about this in like football, like if it was a conference race, like if you had 2 teams, let's say in the NFC East, for instance, that one game Team A beat Team B, but then Team B beats Team A in Week 17. Like Team B, if they were tied, is going to win the championship for the division. Obviously, I didn't look into how broken down this was in terms of the tiebreaker, but in most sports, you would expect, UNC wins the second matchup. UNC is the champion, but with how it's broken down, Duke and UNC being the co-champs, Maryland, they're falling a little bit. But Maryland and Vermont slotted in for Sunday afternoon at 2:30 Eastern time. Let's shift back over to Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Notre Dame will host Drexel. Drexel getting the 11th seed as the CAA champion. Notre Dame falling to 6 in the rankings, maybe even more surprising than Maryland falling to 3. The winner of this one, though, will play the winner of Maryland and Vermont. So what's your outlook on this matchup, and is the Irish falling to 6 a bigger fall than Maryland to 3 for you?
I think Notre Dame should have been higher up. I think they should have had at least probably a 4 seed. So
where most of us had them.
In terms of numbers, I would say that yes, jumping the 2 spots versus, Maryland maybe moving up 1 is a bigger fall. That being said, I don't want to be a committee member because of all these problems. I think that this is going to be an exciting game. I don't know. I'm pretty locked in on my choice, but at the same time, I think this one's going to be fast-paced and it's going to be fun. We've watched Notre Dame all year. We've talked about them all year. Pat Kavanaugh, York, all those guys. They're going to be scoring goals. They're going to be in your face. They're going to be competitive. They've got great face-offs. Keelty in defense is phenomenal. But Drexel's on a 9-game win streak. They haven't been to the tournament since 2014, where they beat Penn. In that game, they did score 3 goals in 11 seconds. So that might be a little bit of a tougher ask, when they don't have the face-off advantage. But Drexel's a team with a lot of power and a lot of firepower. And, Bowering and those guys can score at will almost. And if they get going, it'll be a tough task for Notre Dame to stop them. So this one might have upset potential, but I'm leading Notre Dame. I thought they should have been higher. I have pretty high hopes for them going pretty far, actually. So I could see them definitely getting deep into the tournament, but this one will be another fun one to watch.
I like the America East champion in Vermont. You like the CAA champ in Drexel. We'll see how these two underdogs, really, these two conference champions underdogs come into these two matchups. And then we left these final three games here for the end. What looks to be the three most exciting matchups of opening weekend. Lehigh and Rutgers, Saturday at 2:30 in the afternoon. Georgetown and Syracuse for Saturday night at 7:30. And then to close out this first weekend, Denver and Loyola, Sunday night at 7:30. Let's start with Lehigh and Rutgers. Like Maryland, Rutgers getting their first non-conference games of the year, but unlike the Terrapins, a much more difficult opponent after Lehigh was awarded the Patriot League championship after Loyola was forced to back out of the tournament due to a positive COVID test. So we'll see how these two square off. Rutgers in their first non-conference game after losing both their games to Maryland this season and then to Johns Hopkins in the semifinal of that Big Ten tournament. Lehigh coming in their first or off their first loss, I should say, to end their season to Villanova, which is the only blemish thus far on their roster. What do you make of this matchup here?
Well, this one was an interesting one when I was looking at it. Lehigh, I think they only played two. It looks like they only played two out-of-conference games. One was the loss to Villanova, and one was, I think it was their first game of the year against NJIT. The NJIT win is expected, especially early in the season. And then Villanova was competitive. They were giving everybody a run for their money. They were a bubble team. They could have been in. So, that was a good one to watch. But after that, everything was Patriot. They have 7 wins over teams below 500, including the NJIT win. But it's 2 times they played Colgate, they played Bucknell, and they played Lafayette. And those are not great teams. They have historical wins. Bucknell's been pretty good in the past. Colgate had some good wins this year, but I don't think that those are really doing much for them, in getting better throughout the season. They had a Loyola win, they had a 1-goal win over Army, and they had a Navy win. That's all competitive, and that'll help your team get better. But Rutgers was playing in the Big Ten. They were playing Hopkins. They were playing Ohio State. They were playing Michigan. They're playing Maryland, even though they're losing to Maryland. And while Rutgers, all those teams ended up being below 500 that they beat, they're a different level of competition. I think playing Ohio State twice and beating them twice is better than playing Bucknell twice and beating them twice. I think playing Michigan twice and beating them twice is better than beating Lafayette twice. So I think that Rutgers, while they haven't played anybody outside of the Big Ten, I think they've had better prep for, moving forward this year. And even coming off the Hopkins loss, Hopkins was on a tear through the end of that and into the Big Ten tournament. So I don't see them as taking a step back with that loss. I actually think I'm going to have Rutgers coming out on top in this one. I think that this is one that will be competitive. It'll be intangibles that wins the game, but Rutgers was really impressive this year, and I think they're arguably more impressive than Lehigh, all said and done.
That is one thing that has been at the forefront here of this conversation, is that for Rutgers and Maryland, how good are they is kind of the question, because everyone's kind of doubting the just how good the Big Ten is. It seems like how good the conference is. It's I think when you compare the lower end of the Patriot League with the lower end of the Big Ten, I think there's a pretty significant drop-off. Obviously, the Big Ten kind of having an advantage. So we'll definitely see in this one. Lehigh and Rutgers, the second game of Saturday's quadruple header. Let's look at the Saturday night game here next. Georgetown and Syracuse on the campus of the University of Maryland. Cuse grabbing that final at-large bid for this tournament following a win last Friday against Robert Morris. The Hoyas coming in off their 3rd straight Big East title, their 2nd straight against Denver. One of the more exciting games, I should say, this weekend that we are really looking forward to. What are you watching for out of Georgetown and then out of the Orange?
Georgetown, I'm just gonna see if they're as dominant as they've been all year. They're 12-2. Their only losses were to Loyola by 1, and then Denver early in the year, and they've beaten Denver since then. They got 4 guys with 37 points or more. They got 7 guys with 20-plus points, and TJ Haley has 47 assists. This team scores. They get buckets. all over the field. They have lots of guys that can do it, and they're consistent. They're clearly proven, because that's not an easy conference to win. And then they beat Denver to do it. And then Hughes has been inconsistent all year. They have good wins, and then they have bad losses. And so I'm looking for Hughes, if they want to be competitive, to be as consistent as they were against Robert Morris. They were kind of, while they gave up a lot of goals, they were consistent. They were scoring when they got the ball. They were getting some stops on defense. And we know that Drake Porter in net, and that defense can get stops. But Georgetown's going to be another tough opponent. It's going to be like playing another ACC game where they have to be on top of their game at every level. And Georgetown is going to have to be just as consistent as they've been all year. They've been, like I said, they've been competitive. They've been strong. They look very strong. But if they want to beat a Hughes team that can put up 20-plus goals on you, they're going to have to do it the whole game. Both of these teams have an incredible chance to win this game. But it's very hard to argue who it's going to be. I'm going to give the edge to Georgetown, but that's just because I think they've done it consistently all year. If Hughes plays consistent for 60 minutes and puts it all together for a full 60 minutes, they could easily win this game. And I'm just giving the benefit of the doubt to the team that's shown me they deserve the benefit of the doubt.
Georgetown and Syracuse, the nightcap of Saturday's quadruple header. Let's move on to the final game of round one of the 2021 NCAA tournament. Loyola traveling to the University of Denver to take on the Pioneers. Loyola earning an at-large bid over Patriot League rival Army, who they beat last Friday in the Patriot League semifinals, and Denver coming in off their loss to Georgetown in the Big East final that we just discussed. They get an at-large bid in this tournament as well, and a chance to host a first-round game. Again, one of the more exciting games we're looking forward to this weekend. What are you making of it?
This one's going to be an interesting game, just purely based off of Loyola and how they respond to everything that's happened within the last week. The highs and lows of making a conference tournament and then the championship game, but not being able to play is huge. And because they're a bubble team, their emotions could have gone all over the place. Some guys could have been just absolutely devastated, and that's hard to come back from. It's hard to keep a full roster of guys ready to go when you don't even know if you're going to be playing the following weekend. Denver's 12-4, 2 losses to Georgetown by 1, and 2 early ACC losses, right? They're TD Ierlan is back. They got 2 face-off guys in the 60 percentile. Like, they're strong. And if you don't have your head on straight playing this team, they're going to beat up on you, and it's not going to be pretty. Loyola has the talent. They've got the ability to score, but, I don't know if I'd be able to come down from that and be able to have a good, productive week of practice. You're asking a lot out of a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old kids. So I think it's going to be competitive, and I know that there's the right staff and the right players to do it, but it's not going to be easy. And I think that rebound is going to be the biggest thing. It's not going to be, prep on the field. Obviously there's a little bit of prep on the field that needs to be done, but really reeling your guys back in, Toomey's going to have a big time doing that. So it'll be competitive, and Loyola will score and Denver will score, and they'll go on runs. But I think it's going to be the emotions that'll really dictate coming into the game, how the game goes. So it'll be a good game. I'm a little concerned just, from that roller coaster of a ride that Loyola has been on, but they can win any weekend. So we'll see.
That's pretty much what we've been saying about Loyola all season. It's like every weekend they come in, they have the talent to do it. Obviously at the beginning of the year, it was just kind of up and down season that they had to start. We'll see if they can get it going here, if they can hopefully get back on track after having to concede that Patriot League championship to Lehigh last weekend. So we'll see if they can get back on track. Let's make some picks here ahead of this weekend's games. Me and you are going to be making our picks here on this show. They'll be also on a Lacrosse Flash graphic, I believe, this weekend, along with the other names that we did the conference picks with some other people as well that will be making picks for the NCAA tournament. Let's start with that first matchup that we covered today. The number 1 seed UNC taking on Monmouth at Chapel Hill. That game Saturday, May 15 at 12 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, I'm going to give the edge to UNC. They're too consistent, too strong. I like Monmouth. I know Bryce Wasserman, and I know he's going to be screaming from wherever he's watching. But and he's a gem of a human. But I don't see UNC losing this.
Yeah, this one looks like a UNC kind of maybe a 15-goal margin of victory kind of game. Obviously, Monmouth, I'm from northern Jersey, so Monmouth is somewhere that's fairly close to where I am. I actually know where the University of Monmouth is. But I'm also going to take UNC in this one. Definitely just high-powered offense. Defense is weather-tested, obviously playing through that tough ACC schedule. So I'm going to take the Tar Heels as well. Let's move on to the second game there on Saturday. Lehigh, the Patriot League champions, and Rutgers.
I mentioned it. I think I've kind of given you all my picks already, but I'm going to take Rutgers. I think we don't know what the Big Ten has, and I'm excited to see what they look like playing against some other competition. But I think they hold the edge with just who they've been playing all year and kind of the competition they've faced.
Everybody has been on the opposite there of what you just said in terms of the Big Ten only schedule. Everyone's been like, oh, Maryland's not that good. How good is Rutgers? Because, oh, they're playing this Big Ten only schedule. How good is Penn State really? How good is Ohio State really? Those have been the questions. But this is the opportunity here for Rutgers, and we're going to get to Maryland in a minute. This is their chance here in this first round. And then in the second round, because if Maryland wins, they're probably going to get Notre Dame if Notre Dame wins. So this is their chance here in these first round and then in the second round to prove it. For Rutgers, more so in this first round, just given the matchup. I've been big on Lehigh all year. So I'm going to go Lehigh in this one, probably by a score of like 13-11 or 14-12, something like that. So I'm going with Lehigh. You like Rutgers. Let's move on to this next game, Notre Dame and Drexel. You said before you liked Drexel kind of as putting them on the upset alert, being that they can be a team that can go to somewhere. It looks like they're going to be going out to Denver this weekend. It looks like they're a team that can go out somewhere, put up a lot of goals, and beat someone. Who do you like in this one?
I definitely think that they're the type of team that can do it. This is my kind of dark horse team to maybe get more than one win as a kind of lower ranked seed. What we've seen from Notre Dame, though, this year, I'm not going to waver from that. I think Pat Cavanaugh has kind of put his stamp on the NCAA and been like, put some respect on my name this year. I think top to bottom, they're such a strong program, and they're going to be ready to go from the outset. So I think I got to give the edge to Notre Dame. I really want to take Drexel, but it's smart money on Notre Dame right now.
Drexel is the upset pick. When we see the lines released, which I do believe there are lax lines released, but whatever it is, if it's Drexel like plus 4.5, Drexel plus 5.5, that's what we like. We like that line. Hammer that. We like Drexel plus 2.5, maybe even. If they can keep this close, we'll see what Drexel can do. I also like Notre Dame in this one. Again, though, I like everything you did say about the Drexel Dragons, but Notre Dame, their defense is one of the best defenses in the country. Obviously, the offense led by Pat Cavanaugh. Too strong, I think, in this one. I think Notre Dame moves on to round 2, to that quarterfinal. Let's move on to the Saturday night game, Georgetown and Syracuse. Kind of speaking of that last one, Drexel, you're saying kind of a team that you can see going far in this tournament, kind of getting through this first round. There has not been an upset of the top 5 seeds in this tournament in the past 3 tournaments. So obviously taking out 2020 and 2017, 2018, and 2019. We haven't seen an upset of the top 5 seeds. Drexel is the 11 seed going against Notre Dame, the 6 seed. This one, though, Georgetown and Syracuse, the 5 seed and the 12 seed, kind of looks like that upset, even though Syracuse over Georgetown doesn't really look like an upset. Obviously, though, just how the seeding is laid out, it would be an upset. But obviously, 2 teams, Big East champion against an ACC powerhouse. Obviously not this season, but Syracuse being a phenomenal team coming into this one at College Park Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Who do you got on this one, Georgetown and Syracuse?
I'm going to take Georgetown. Like I said, I think they're consistent, they're strong, and they have the ability to do it across the board. I actually, in my mock tournament, I didn't have Q's in. I thought as a 5 seed in the ACC that a couple other teams kind of deserved it, and that inconsistency didn't give them the right tools to get in as an at-large. Now, they have 2 wins over UVA, and they're historically phenomenal, but it's tough because they can put up 20 goals, like I said. I'll give the edge to Georgetown, and I'll just leave it at that because I'll probably end up eating my words later.
I had Villanova in my tournament. I had Villanova a part of mine. I had Army ahead of Loyola. So Syracuse and Loyola were my 2 on the outside. I also like Georgetown in this one, but definitely Syracuse being a team that can come in. They can put up 15-plus goals here against Georgetown. I could definitely see them come in, put up 20-plus goals, and beat a team like Georgetown. But obviously, Georgetown coming in, I think they have a lot of momentum coming in off of that Big East championship. So I have Georgetown as well in this one. Let's look at the Sunday slate. To start it off, to kick it off, 12 p.m. Eastern, number 4, Virginia and Bryant. Bryant, a team, as we're saying, coming off a handful of hurdles. This could be my upset. This could be my upset team right here. What do you like here, Virginia and Bryant?
I'm going to take Virginia. People aren't remembering that they're the defending champs right now. There was no national championship winner in 2020, so Virginia is going to come back wanting to do it again. They got Docs back this year. They lost a couple games to Syracuse and a couple other spots there. They're big, they're strong, they're fast. They have all the firepower for scoring goals at will. I think that they have that edge, and they'll probably keep it, but it'll be a close one.
I kind of just talked myself into it as you were speaking there. I'm going to take Bryant in this one. Definitely want to take an upset of the top 5. I liked Vermont. I didn't think I was going to pick Vermont, but I liked Vermont. You kind of talked me out of me liking Vermont as much as I did, but you talked me into liking Bryant as much as I do now. So I'm going to take Bryant here against Virginia in Charlottesville Sunday morning.
That's the other
Sunday
thing
morning for you guys on the West Coast. Sunday early afternoon for us on the East Coast. I'm going to take Bryant.
That's the one thing you got to remember. They're also in Charlottesville. So that's a home game for UVA.
I'm going to take Bryant anyway. I like Bryant in this one. Moving on, number 3, Maryland taking on Vermont.
Terps. Hammer the Terps. It's no-brainer.
First non-conference game of the year for the Terrapins, but yeah, I'm going to take Maryland as well. Again, I was trying to talk myself into Vermont, but like I said, Liam talked me out of Vermont, but talked me into Bryant, so we're going Bryant against Virginia at home. I'm not exactly liking that pick as much anymore, but we're going to move on anyway. Number 2, Duke, and number 15, High Point in the rematch here. This one going down in Chapel Hill.
Duke, but I think that it is going to be more competitive than we've seen earlier this season. I think if it had been a 17-12 game the first time they played, 17-10, even in that range, I might be leaning towards a High Point upset, but they won by 19. That's hard to ignore. So I think I got to give them the edge. Like I said, I love the High Point guys. They've been hype train all year, but it's Blue Devils.
I talked to Mike Sowers just a few weeks ago, and he said that their season, they got a lot to prove here. Pretty much is the gist of what he told me. I'm going to go Duke here as well, continuing on in their tournament. Denver and Loyola, the last game of this first round of the NCAA tournament, Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Again, all these games this weekend on ESPNU. But Denver and Loyola.
This one is a hard one for me just because, like I said, you don't know what's going to happen coming back from Loyola and how they're going to react to last weekend. I think that Denver is pretty safe bet here. But we've seen Loyola come up with some big wins. They've beaten some really good teams. I'm going to say Denver, but that's just because I'm going to give the edge to the face-offs and then your Jackson Morrill, Jack Hanna, those guys, Ethan Walker up front. It's a little too strong for Loyola.
the face-off game for Denver, not as good as I think we were expecting it to be, just because I think we expected TD Ierlan to come in and dominate just as usual. But obviously with the new SNG face-off rules, he hasn't been as dominant, has had some very dominant games, but hasn't been as dominant. Alex Stathakis, though, has been just as dominant, I feel like, as we've seen TD Ierlan be in the last couple of seasons. Stathakis playing really, really well. So face-off not as dominant as kind of we came into the season expecting Denver to be, but still very good. I'm also going to take Denver, agreeing with you with that offensive firepower. I think they have enough of it to get the job done here at home on Sunday night. So there are our picks for this first round. Liam, as we look ahead to the men's NCAA tournament, any final thoughts here on the bracket and then round one before I let you go, and then welcome in Archers, Rock, and Team USA midfielder Tom Schreiber?
Not a lot to say except that this is going to be one of the most exciting weekends of lacrosse we've seen all season. We had our first weekend back, which was obviously a big deal. That was first weekend of lacrosse in a very long time. But the matchups that we've been given, while some of them were unexpected, this is one of the best first tournament weekends I've seen in a long time. There's a lot of parity and there's a lot of really good teams that I have a feeling we're going to see more than one upset. I'm just excited to see who it is.
And we're going to have hopefully we do see a few upsets. Definitely. I got Bryant as my upset. I don't know if you had an official upset.
I think the Rutgers game technically is an upset.
We'll definitely give Rutgers as the upset. I was just looking back and I was like, oh, who was the upset here that you had?
Yeah.
But you have Rutgers.
I have Rutgers over Lehigh. Yeah.
Definitely. As you're saying, a very exciting weekend that we have this weekend. And, look back at last week. It kind of tried to sell it last weekend that, we start the exciting weekends this weekend, which was last weekend, but none of the ACC teams played last weekend. So now we get to see all of them play this weekend. We're going to have this round one here, as you're saying, one of the most exciting weekends of lacrosse that probably we're going to have all year. And then next weekend is going to be, again, the most exciting weekend with the quarterfinals. I'm looking at the bracket now. If kind of all goes well, and then kind of just with a question mark there as to what you want it to be as well. But we could see a Georgetown, Virginia quarterfinal. We could see a Denver, Duke quarterfinal, a Maryland, Notre Dame quarterfinal, and then a North Carolina against either Lehigh or Rutgers. Either of those matchups could be a good game. So definitely this weekend going to be exciting. Next weekend going to be exciting. Then we got Memorial Day weekend, which is the Final Four. And then the weekend after that, the PLL starts. So we have a very good lineup here of weekends here for lacrosse. Definitely excited for it all. Liam, I appreciate you joining me. As always, a pleasure having you on as we look ahead to a big weekend of NCAA tournament lacrosse. Again, it'll all be on ESPNU, so make sure to tune in throughout the weekend as we have yet another weekend of unbelievable lacrosse. Liam's official picks that he just laid out will be on Twitter ahead of this weekend's games. Make sure to follow along at GL Extended and at Lacrosse Flash to see who he and I are going to be selecting in this week's games, as well as the rest of our Lacrosse Flash staff. So stay tuned for that. Liam, thank you again, my man. Archers midfielder Tom Schreiber will be joining me next. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to the show, Goal Line Extended on the Lacrosse Flash Podcast Network. I hope you're all having a fantastic day and hopefully enjoying the show. Make sure to follow and subscribe to GL Extended and Lacrosse Flash if you are, as we have a big show today as we look ahead to this weekend's NCAA matchups with the tournament kicking off tomorrow, Saturday at 12 Eastern on ESPNU, with Monmouth traveling to Chapel Hill to take on UNC, the number one seed in this tournament. Unfortunately, our guest today, his alma mater, did not play this season as Princeton in the Ivy League deciding to not play spring sports due to COVID-19, so not qualifying for this NCAA championship. But despite that, they were looking like a possible favorite there in 2020 with Michael Sowers leading the way. But an exciting weekend nonetheless, 4 games on Saturday and 4 more on Sunday. We're also continuing our team previews ahead of the 2021 PLL season. And today we will be talking about the Archers Lacrosse Club. And who better to talk about the orange and blue than Tom Schreiber, 2-time PLL Midfielder of the Year and 2-time Pro Lacrosse MVP in the MLO and a 2018 All-World Team member and gold medal winner. Tom, what's going on? Welcome to GLE.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate the reminder that Princeton's not playing this year because they did end last year number 1 in the country. So proud of those guys, and happy to keep an eye on Michael Sowers playing for Duke, but missing the Tigers this year.
That's why I had to make sure I mentioned it, because they were one of the top teams last year before COVID-19 obviously screwed up our hopes there for conference championships and NCAA championships there in 2020, but not around in 2021. But then, as you said, Michael Sowers still doing really well here with Duke in 2021. They are the 2 seed, and they'll be playing, I believe, on Sunday. But we're glad to have you, Tom, here joining us. As today, we're going to be looking ahead to your 2021 season as well as your team season, the Archers, as we approach training camp and week 1 in Boston. And then your NLL team, The Rock, the news breaking just this week that your team will be relocating home games from Toronto to Hamilton. So a lot to cover, but we'll get to all of that in a little bit. But first, the offseason prep for this summer. I'd imagine you altered what you did last year in some way with the format of the PLO Championship Series. Obviously, back to the normal regular season that we are used to this year, but you look at the schedule for this summer, and there's some parts to it that look very similar to what we saw in last year's 3-week tournament, and as each team will be playing 2 games in 1 weekend twice for your team in week 4 and in week 8. So looking at how this season's schedule is laid out, is there anything that you did specifically during last year's tournament or in the lead up to last year's tournament that you think might benefit you during those tough weekends with 2 games, or even every weekend in terms of your preparation for game day? And were you able to take anything from last offseason and carry it over into what you did to get ready for this season?
Yeah, 100%. I think, regardless of whether you're a lacrosse player or not, I think everybody's probably learned a few things going through such a weird experience like that. But for us, playing so few games or less games than we're used to playing in such a short amount of time definitely altered my training. It was a lot more focused on being in shape and conditioning and being on top of recovery and things like that. And, I've certainly used that stuff in my training this year as well. Some different workouts, some different little methods on how to stay fresh and feel good after games. And I think it'll certainly come into play, especially during those doubleheader weekends, which we're excited for, but also, really just throughout the season.
In 2021, we are back to that weekly schedule, but it does feature a few of those weekends where your team will play those 2 games, one of them happening to be in week 4 out in Long Island, somewhere that you're pretty familiar with. How excited are you to be getting back to the tour-based model and then particularly playing again on Long Island out in front of friends and family?
Yeah, I think getting back in front of fans is something that's going to be really exciting. I think it's something that a lot of guys are aware of, but I think it'll take us all by surprise a little bit. It's just one of those things that, is exhilarating, when whether it's the PLL, the NLL, whatever it is, just being in front of those fans is such a cool experience. And in the PLL in particular, having that tour-based model where there's so much excitement around these weekends, and it's the one time the PLL is there, all the teams are there, that festival feel. It's just, it's a really special experience. And it's, it reminds me of when I was a kid, going to games and having that access as a fan. So I can't wait for that. And then, on Long Island, you touched on it. That's Hofstra pretty much is in my hometown. So expecting a bunch of friends and family and whatnot. And, I've always had, a great experience playing at that venue. And I think to have 2 games is a pretty nice thing. And we'll be, into the meat of our season, and we got 2 great opponents. So I think it'll be a blast.
And then you look at week 8, 2 more great opponents and 2 teams. You look at the Whip Snakes. You're playing both of them, or you're playing the Whip Snakes on both of those weekends. So exciting games there for you as well. We expected the 2021 schedule to look pretty unique as the league welcomed the 8th Lacrosse Club and got back to the tour model. But I don't think many people expected 5 games in a weekend, which we're all really excited about. And then in week 8, we'll have 6. So some more changes to the scheduling for the 2021 season, but all changes that we are, like I said, excited about. And then speaking of changes, especially ones that I'd be excited about if I was you or Archers lacrosse fans, your head coach, Chris Bates, made a handful of changes this offseason to get this Archers team ready for 2021, especially to get this offense reloaded and reset. As back in February, he sent midfielder Ncaa to the chaos for attackman Connor Fields. In March, he drafted Ryan McNamara and picked up attackman Nate Solomon off of waivers. And then in the college draft a few weeks ago, he added Trey LeClaire out of Ohio State and UMass midfielder Jeff Traynor to add depth to an already really deep group consisting of yourself, Ryan Ambler, Christian Mazzone, and Joey Sankey in the midfield, and then Grant Ament, Will Manny, and Marcus Holman headlining that attack. How do you expect this offense to come together, especially with all these new pieces set to join here? And then in year 3, where do you see certain guys fitting in around your game and the games of guys like Ament and Manny?
I think it's just something. I think it's a good problem to have, right? To have to be able to figure that out with everybody you mentioned is a stud lacrosse player, and I think you mentioned Connor first, and I think he's one of the best players in the world. And anytime you bring in somebody with that sort of skill set, it's only going to help your offense. And it's something I've never played with him. We've been chatting a bunch since he came over to the team, but I'm looking forward to getting out there with him and just kind of play off of him. I think he's a really underrated feeder. I think he draws so much attention, and he brings such a unique skill set to our offense, especially on that left side. I think it'll be really fun. And then, really all the other pieces on the offensive end are incredible too. I think Ryan McNamara is a hell of a player. I think, he used to give us fits when I played in Ohio and he was playing for the Rattlers. So it's good to have him on our side, and, bringing in Nate Solomon. He's been working out with us here in Hoboken the last couple of weeks, and he looks great. And the rookies, I think they all bring a lot to the table. So, I'm excited about all of it, and I'm excited to see how our offense can kind of continue to evolve. I think in the bubble, we played pretty well, but I don't think we kind of unlocked everything that we're capable of. And I think just adding some new pieces, and, we're a hungry team and feel that we haven't performed as well as we could have and up to our potential. So bringing in some new guys, I think it'll make for a competitive camp. And, we're super excited for this year, and bringing in all those new pieces will be part of that excitement and a fun challenge.
Making camp competitive, kind of in my conversations with head coaches and then with other players, that kind of is the resonating theme, just to make that experience as competitive as possible to prepare you guys for the 2021 season. But we've been talking about it a lot on this show over the past few weeks. This Archers offense is looking like it has, ahead of the past 2 seasons, like one of the top offensive units in this league, and we'll see who comes out of training camp still on that offense, as Coach Bates and his staff will need to slim down a few players ahead of the season. But the offense looks real good ahead of training camp in Boston. How about your team's defense? Now, I wasn't a huge fan of the trade of Eli Gobrecht, but that's out of your hands and more of a question here for Coach Bates. But that aside, back in March in the entry draft, he had Graham Hossack, one of the best defensive players in the game, some might say, to lead your defense alongside Matt McMahon. Warren Jeffrey falls to round 3, and then Latrell Harris available in the waivers, a teammate of yours with the Rock that is able to do a lot of different things as an athlete on the lacrosse field. And then in the college draft, LSM Jared Connors, who I had pegged as my top player in the draft, falls you guys at 5 overall to make up what looks like the best LSM duo in the league in Scott Ratliff and Connors. So you're welcoming these 4 guys, as well as welcoming back Jackson Place, who missed last summer due to injury, creating a ton of, as you said before, competition with all the talent on this defensive unit for roster spots and then game day spots as well. How do you think that will benefit your team down the stretch, and this defense in particular?
Yeah, I think it's similar to the offensive side. I think we certainly added some new pieces and guys that we're really excited about, especially people who are familiar with the box game, between bringing in Graham and Warren and Latrell, all guys that have really performed in the box world and have been great, and guys that you don't want to play against, which will make for a fun camp for us. But I think anytime you have guys like that on your team, it's a good thing. And Jared Connors, watching him play the last few years, he brings so much to the table, and I think there's no one better to learn from and to work with than Scott Ratliff. So I'm really excited about our defense. I think training camp will be, again, really competitive, which I think it will be for all teams, but it's something that we're excited about. And the hope is to just evolve as a team, and I think coach has put us in a good place to be successful, and now it's on us to come together and perform on the field.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, wasn't a huge fan of that Eli Gobrecht trade, but your defense still very strong as it is, and your team adds a midfielder in this college draft that Coach Bates can hopefully build around heading into this season and seasons to come. And along with you, he'll head into training camp with 28 other players, 29 in total, and including you, he'll need to get down to 25. So we'll see over the next few weeks and then come training camp who those other 24 might be. But we're looking at the goalie and face-off position here next, the specialists on your team. Coach Bates brought in another goalie and Ncaa following the entry draft to create some depth behind Drew Adams and Adam Gittleman, the goalie tandem deployed by your team over the past 2 summers. And then Connor Gaffney was drafted in the college draft with Noah Rack added following that draft to fill out the roster, along with Stephen Bones Kelly at the face-off X. So 6 guys right there. And with the roster limitations that we've talked about, the expectation is that your team will most likely carry only 4 of them, 2 at each position heading into the season. But we never know. Nonetheless, creating competition in training camp to hopefully raise the level of play. I'd imagine we do see Adams and Gittleman between the pipes like in seasons past. But how do you see your team's goalie situation playing out ahead of camp, and then the face-off situation, as well as you're set to welcome Gaffney and Rack to this Archers locker room?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of the personnel stuff is right out of like any player's hands, but I think it's that same theme as it is on the offense and defense, right? Anytime you have 3 competitors at a single position, I think that just kind of brings the best out of everybody. And in the goal, like Drew and Adam have been so great the last few years on the field, off the field. They're both tremendous leaders. Like, Adam does so much on the scout and does so much behind the scenes. And I think anytime you have guys like that on your team, it's a good thing. So I think in the net, Ncaa is somebody who played for Coach Cav on our staff at Vermont, and I know he thinks really highly of him. So, I'm looking forward to seeing what he has. And then, at the face-off X, I'm fans of all those guys, both of the new guys. It was a shame to see Brendan Fowler go, and really, with expansion, just overall, it's kind of a bummer to see so many players go. Like, as excited as we are to see some of these new guys, and you mentioned Eli and like Ian Ncaa, like it's a bummer to see guys like that go, especially in such like a unique situation in the PLL. You're literally starting from scratch. And you had guys who like contributed to our culture and contributed to our team in like a very cool way, like in year 1 and like building this thing out and going through the bubble and all that. So as exciting as it is to bring in the new guys, much respect to everyone who's like not on our team anymore, which is, I guess, part of the process. But going back to your original question, like the specialties, the goalies and the faceoffs, obviously a super important part of the game. And, like offense and defense, I feel that, coach has kind of put us in a good position to, continue to elevate our games all over the place. So again, I think it'll all be a battle, and, that's kind of, I think, will be the theme of our camp. It's like everyone's kind of battling it out, and I think that'll make everyone better.
As you said, a lot of changes, as I was bringing up before. Some guys you're bringing in, but obviously, like you're saying, guys that you're going to be that you lost already heading into this season. A handful of changes to this roster made by Coach Bates, and then in that expansion draft, hopefully for the better as you guys try to get over that hump and get to that championship game. But we'll see what you guys do this season, especially early on out of training camp, and expecting big things from this Archers squad. The Toronto Rock, you guys still will be called the Toronto Rock, but you'll be playing your home games in First Ontario Centre in Hamilton, Ontario. What will you miss most about playing in Toronto in front of the fans at Scotiabank Arena?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unique for me just because it was all so new, going back a few years. Not so new anymore. I'm like quietly like becoming a vet in that league. But I'm excited about the news. I found out a little bit ago, and from everything that I've gathered, it seems like a great move and something that we're excited about. But my first time coming to Canada was for a training camp, and the city of Toronto has been nothing but good to me. And I'd say there's a couple good food spots that I had over there that I'll definitely miss. But I think I'm hopeful and confident that a lot of the fans that cheered so loudly and were so into the game for us will come over to Hamilton, and we'll have a similar experience over there. But it's always been a great place to play, and something that I've always really enjoyed about the NLL overall is the fans and the atmosphere that you have. And I think playing in Toronto in particular was something that was really cool. And from everything that I understand, and looking forward to next season, I got a lot to focus on in the PLL first, but it seems like a really great opportunity. And, I think we'll have some great fans in front of us over in Hamilton, and something, I'm excited for.
We are hoping that those fans do make the trip out to Hamilton and then obviously support there in the audience. Tom, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today to join us here on Goal Line Extended. Before I let you go, this weekend kicks off the NCAA tournament, and I have some first-round matchups here in front of me if you're interested in making some picks. The 2:30 game on Saturday afternoon, Lehigh, the Patriot League champ, in Rutgers. Who do you got on this one?
Man, I like both of those teams a lot. I'll go with Rutgers. I'm not going to think about these too much. I'm going to give you rapid fire answers because I don't want to overthink them.
Princeton's not in it, so obviously Princeton would have been the rapid fire. A couple Ivies would have been the rapid fire. Rapid
100%.
fire picks here. On Saturday night, the Big East champion Georgetown will host Syracuse in College Park. Not exactly the season that the Orange and Cuse fans were hoping for, but they're able to grab an at-large bid for this tournament. Who do you got?
Georgetown.
Sunday night, to wrap up the first round of the tournament, the Pioneers will host Loyola at the University of Denver. Denver coming off that loss to Georgetown in the Big East final, and Loyola forced to concede the Patriot League final to Lehigh after reporting a positive COVID test. Not exactly what we were hoping there for Lehigh, but the Pioneers and Greyhounds. Who do you like in this one?
I think that'll be an awesome game, and happy that Loyola was able to continue their season. That was just kind of like a bummer situation for everybody. But I think DU will be ready to play. They're at home, so I'll go with the Pios.
Pioneers, the 7th seed. As for the other ones, we haven't seen an upset of one of the top 5 teams in the tournament in the past 3 tournaments. So we'll see if Syracuse as the 12th seed can be one of those upsets. Maybe Vermont as the 14th seed against Maryland. Maybe they can throw a wrinkle into this year's tournament in this year's May Madness as well. Tom, I want to thank you again. Best of luck this summer to you and your team as we're expecting big things from the Archers this season.
Yep. Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me.
Jordan Johnson will be joining me next. We'll be right back.
You're watching Goal Line Extended, presented by Lacrosse Flash.
Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Ryan Holsabus, and Jordan Johnson is with me as well. Lacrosse Flash, PLL and college lacrosse analyst, as we continue our 2021 PLL team previews ahead of training camp in the 2021 season. We started with Austin Owens and the expansion Cannons on Tuesday's show, and today Jordan and I will be looking at the Archers Lacrosse Club as Chris Bates and his team gets geared up for the 2021 season. Jordan, welcome back to GLE, my friend. What's going on?
Nothing much, man. Just getting ready for the PLL season. Get college games this week. Excited, man.
Very exciting slate of college games. And as you said, getting ready for the PLL season, the 2021 season ahead of training camp. And that's what we're going to be doing today because we're going to be talking about the Archers ahead of training camp. But before we get to that, on Wednesday, the league dropped the TV package and schedule for this season with 23 games to be played and broadcasted exclusively on NBC's subscription-based service Peacock, with 17 to be broadcasted on NBC Sports Network and the remaining 4 games to be on NBC, including the championship, and those 21 games on NBC and NBCSN will also be available on Peacock as well and on the NBC Sports app and at NBCSports.com. The most professional lacrosse games in a season on television ever. So definitely a lot to be excited about heading into this season. But the PLL streaming live on Peacock for $4.99 a month. You can't really get better than that.
Hell yeah, man. You can't beat it. You get Peacock and The Office. I mean, you get the PLL, The Office. You get that show with Michael Smith. I don't know the name of it. It's a great podcast. Check it out if you have time. You don't beat it, man. That's all I gotta say.
Definitely not an ad here to read here for NBC or for Peacock, but as a fan of the PLL, make sure that you get your Peacock subscription so that you can watch every game this season. You definitely don't want to miss out as the summer kicks off on June 4 between the Redwoods and those expansion Cannons. But like I said before, today Jordan and I are going to be discussing the Archers going into 2021 as we are officially today exactly 2 weeks from the start of training camp in Boston, 3 weeks from the start of the season. So let's get right to it. Jordan, let's start with the specialists on this team, because unlike the Cannons on Tuesday's show with Austin, the Archers face-off and goalie situation looks to be more up in the air in terms of how many guys get kept and who exactly gets kept. So let's start with that goalie situation. Gittleman and Adams have split time over the past 2 seasons, and splitting time in the literal sense, splitting halves for almost each game since midway through the 2019 season. And the Archers have been one of the better teams during that stretch, and we've seen this 2-goalie system work out for Chris Bates, as in last year's tournament. We saw Adam Gittleman come in the second half in the game against the Water Dogs, and he only allowed 1 goal while making 10 saves in a comeback win for the Archers. So it did prove to work on a few occasions, and I talked with Coach Bates a few weeks ago heading into the college draft, and although he did not say that he wouldn't mind going with that 2-goalie system again, he did say he would rather have his goalie situation figured out. But we will see come the end of training camp and week 1 in Boston what he ends up deciding. But also on his current Archers roster is Nick Washuta, but you leave him off your 25-man roster here out of training camp, going with the 2 proven guys in Gittleman and Adams. Adams 69 saves away from 2,000 all time. I'd imagine not a difficult decision here for you, keeping Adams and Gittleman around.
For sure. There's a part of me that says I want to keep a younger guy, or that I think they'll keep a younger guy. But it's hard when you get Drew Adams and Adam Gittleman in camp. They're going to perform like you want them to. It's going to be hard. It's frankly going to be hard to beat those 2 out. And that's with pretty much all of these goalies in the league. That's part of the reason why you didn't see a lot of them get drafted. The face-off and the goalie positions are 2 of the most talented positions in this league, and they're 2 of the most loaded positions. So that's why I have Gittleman and Drew Adams. If I had to take my guess on who's going to start game 1, I'll go Adam Gittleman. Just because I think he does give you a little bit more. He can run out more. Not Drew is more of a, I hate to use the word statue, but he is that type. He's going to hang around the cage a little bit more versus Adam Gittleman's just that more athletic guy. As Coach Bates said, he'd like to have ideally have it more consistently with 1, but I think to start off with, you got to keep going with what's working, and that 2-goalie system is working for them. So I don't see why they should get away from it.
Absolutely. That is your goalie situation there. We'll see if Coach Bates decide to go with that 2-goalie system again into 2021. Let's move on to the face-off X. Coach Bates drafted Connor Gaffney out of Lehigh in the 3rd round of the college draft after missing out on Kyle Gallagher there in round 2. And then he also picked up Noah Rack out of the after that college draft to compete alongside Stephen Kelly. And you have all 3 of these face-off guys coming out of training camp and making this team. Explain that decision, and how do you think Bates utilizes this group of draw guys? Bones Kelly, obviously his guy over the past 2 seasons, but we should see plenty of one or both of these other 2 names, especially if both of them make the final 25-man roster.
So to put this in perspective, I think they'll have 2 active on game day. 3, I think you don't draft Connor Gaffney for him to not make the 25-man roster, but I think it'll be a combination of either Kelly and Noah Rack 1 week, or Kelly and Gaffney 1 week. I would likely think, unless Gaffney blows everyone away in training camp, that would be the combination of Kelly and Rack going into week 1. Greg Gorenly and a bunch of these face-off guys have talked about the adjustment with these PLL rules. That's why I think the Archers kept Stephen Kelly when they could have moved him in the college draft for a guy like TD. They could have went up and gotten Max Adler if they wanted to. But instead, you keep a guy in Bones Kelly who, he's consistent. You know what he's going to get. And then you have that second guy to complement him. I mean, you look at Noah Rack in the MLL last year in the bubble, really surprised a lot of people. He had a really good few games. I just want to say year, but being granted only a few games, playing well with the Hammerheads. And I think you roll into week 1 with the vets, and then you kind of bring Gaffney along. If you bring him up, let's just say for week 2, and he shows that he can hang, then I think you leave him up. And if it gets to that point where we're around the trade deadline and they haven't found that guy, then you have options for trades and whatnot. So that's going to be really interesting to follow. It might be the most interesting sort of competition going into camp is what the Archers are going to do at face-off.
Yeah, well, you definitely look at the rest of this team. Their offense, we're going to get to it in a minute, is absolutely loaded. They obviously added some guys here in the offseason. Their defense also really, really talented. They added some guys there as well. So really the one question mark coming into the season was face-off. And I was one of those proponents of, hey, like if I'm Chris Bates, I'm trying to jump the Redwoods at 4 here. I'm trying to get and secure TD Erlin if I can get up to 2 or if I can get up to 3. So I was one of those guys saying, yeah, if I'm Chris Bates, I want to make that move, solidify my face-off position. But as you said, they wouldn't have traded Connor Gaffney.
And here's the thing, a lot of these younger guys too, that I think a lot of people aren't exactly looking at. A lot of these guys that got drafted are on tournament teams. If somebody makes the run to Memorial Day weekend, they're not going to have camp, and they're going to be really behind. So I think you'll be surprised at the amount of veterans that make the initial game day rosters in week 1. Then you kind of got to bring the younger guys in because, mind you, a lot of them have played a lot of lacrosse here. Some of them, frankly, want their social life back. They've been in that college rules or whatever. We're talking about coming into the summer. So, Grant, I know you don't necessarily. You can counter that by saying, well, why commit to the PLL? But obviously everyone wants to play pro. If you get drafted, you're going to want to play in some sort. But I think in this year, it's going to be interesting to see how many young guys truly do play. And I think it's going to shock a lot more people when some of these bigger named young guys may not necessarily be playing in week 1, but we'll see them down the line later in the season.
Definitely a good point because there are a handful of guys. Let's think Michael Sowers with Duke or Jared Connors with Virginia or
even Lehigh, like with Gaffney. If they go on a run here, I'm not making any predictions, guys, but if they were to theoretically go on a run here, he would miss camp.
That is what I was getting at. Pretty much for any of these teams, for these college teams, if they do go on a run, Memorial Day weekend is the Final Four weekend. That is the weekend of training camp for the PLL.
Classic example of that is Ryan Conrad. He goes on that run with Virginia, plays in week 1 with the Atlas. Then he has to miss a good chunk of the season because he's figuring out his work situation. So that's just something to put into your mind as we go into camp in the season.
Absolutely. They're definitely focusing on that face-off situation for the Archers, given that Connor Gaffney, one of the 2 face-off specialists, Connor Sisselberger, really, the guy with Lehigh that has been playing really well there at the face-off X, but Gaffney as well. But as you bring up there, definitely keeping that in mind going forward with guys in terms of if certain players will be playing that Memorial Day weekend, maybe they want a week off there for week 1. We'll definitely see how that all plays out. But in terms of specialists on this team, you have 5, including the goalie and face-off specialists, 5 in total, making your final 25-man roster. Most likely, as you said before, to fill up 4 of those game roster spots on a week-to-week basis. Most likely 2 goalies, 2 face-off specialists, if they do keep 3 on the final 25. But that's something that we will follow here. Let's move on to the defense in front of Gittleman and Adams and possibly Nick Washuta. Scott Ratliff and Jared Connors forms possibly the best LSM duo in the league. Obviously, once Connors joins the Archers from his time with Virginia, along with one of the best short stick defensive midfield tandems in Dominique Alexander, Mark McNeil, and a Lacrosse Flash fan favorite, Latrell Harris, who makes up your final 25. A guy that can play short stick defensive midfield and LSM. He can slot in that close defense as well. So a lot of flexibility when you have a guy like Harris. And then making up the defense following the draft day trade of Eli Gobrecht is Matt McMahon, Graham Hossack, Warren Jeffrey, and Jackson Place, who missed all of 2020 following that neck injury in the 2019 playoffs. You include him over 2019 college draft selection Jack 2020 college draft selection Jack Rapine, who did get some game action last summer in Utah. I had this defense pegged as one of, if not the best in the league with Eli Gobrecht. I don't share that same belief without him, but still a good unit overall. How do you think this defense comes together above the goal, and who in your eyes makes the biggest impact down low for the Archers here?
Graham Hossack. Having him play close D is going to be the best move of the offseason, without a doubt. He is a number 1 lockdown defender. He's up there with the Tucker Durkins, the Rowletts, the Newmans, whoever you want to throw in that conversation. Watch out. Just because he hasn't played in a couple of years doesn't mean there's no fall off. He was the best defender back in MLL with the Blaze. And he's going to hit people like Epple, and he's going to be able to run transition like Newman. And speaking of transition, I think all of these moves for the Archers on defense prove how much more transition they want to play. I was surprised with getting rid of a guy like Mike Simon, but when you add guys like Connors, like Harris, and Ratliff, who all had the ability to shoot from two and be a threat from 2-point range, this just shows how much more versatility that the Archers want to have. And even when we get further in, talking about being able to feed guys like Fields who might be coming out of the box and whatnot, it seems like in the PLL this offseason, more teams wanted to become versatile. You see a lot more close D guys becoming LSMs, a lot of close D guys running transition, attackmen turning into midfielders and whatnot. You're really going to have to maneuver guys around per se.
That shortened field, the shortened shot clock, all that kind of playing an effect. And we're seeing now coaches and teams and players starting to get kind of on top of it, kind of up to date here with the rules as we get into year 3 here. But moving up the Archers roster, it's evident that they are in no way lacking offensive firepower. And smart on your part, you're keeping all these pieces around. A ton of offensive weapons, led by the likes of presumptive 2020 Rookie of the Year Grant Amen, who we'll see again in 2021 alongside Will Manny, Marcus Holman, and off-season trade acquisition Connor Fields, who comes on over in a trade with the Chaos. How does Fields' addition to this team and to this attack help this offense? As we could also see him running, as you said, out of the box as a midfielder, a lot of different ways that you can use a player with a skill set like his.
Oh, it helps them tremendously. And my question is, who gets the shorty matchup? I don't think you give it to Grant Ament. I sure wouldn't give it to Marcus Holman, who can shoot the ball from anywhere. So if you're talking about giving it to a guy like Fields, who's going to be able to dodge his way out of a shorty in a heartbeat, good luck covering that, man. Fields is that guy that granted he had his struggles with the Chaos, and you can look back on that and say, fine, whatever. He held the ball in his stick too much. He's not going to have to do that with the Archers, and he's going to open it up for somebody. It's kind of like in football. There's guys that they may not be the quote unquote best guy, but they're the guys that you're going to have to double up, right? And therefore, it opens it up for another guy. Fields is that guy for the Archers. I'm not saying that you're going to double him per se, but even with his short stick matchup, and people forget about Fields too, is he's not just a scorer. He's somebody who can feed. Go back and watch the tape of him and Lyle Thompson feeding each other. Man, you'll have fun watching that. But so back to my point, Fields is a guy that's just going to be able to open things up and give them more versatility. And something that the Archers did lack is 2-point shooting in the last couple years. So I'm interested to see how Fields fares into that, whether you're able to get him on the crease and maybe feed Marcus Holman, a guy who has range or whatnot, or if you start getting Grant Ament to shoot the 2-point shot. I'm interested to see how they go about that, because I think that's kind of one of their missing links as far as winning a championship, is they haven't been great from 2. And the Archers have been, in my opinion, a team that's worthy of playing on championship weekend the past 2 years, but it's always come down to that one goal, that one missing piece, it's that one turnover, whatever. And that's what I feel like Bates really focused on is, hey, it's such a small gap, but I can't stay stagnant forever. I've got to get these moves, whether it's I've got to have a more versatile team, I've got to shoot more twos, or you got to be able to play in all types of games. If you got to go out, shoot somebody, fine. If you got to lock them down on defense, fine. It can't be one or the other. And I feel like Bates did a really good job of just filling in those smaller gaps for them.
Two things that you mentioned, I think I'll agree as well. Two things keeping this Archers team, or that did keep this Archers team kind of from getting over the hump the past 2 seasons. You mentioned 2-point shooting, which now you bring in Connor Fields, you bring in Trey LeClaire, you bring in Ryan McNamara, a handful of these shooters that you can have as step-down guys from behind that 2-point arc, and then transition. So now you bring in Jared Connors, one of the best players in the country. But definitely one of the best LSMs and transition players in the country. You bring in a Latrell Harris. You bring in a Jeff Trainer, who you traded for. You traded Eli Gobrecht to get him. So transition and 2-point shooting, kind of the lacks of this team. And now, during this offseason, Chris Bates kind of retooling his team as well. We talked about retooling for a number of these other teams, but Chris Bates doing it here, trying to address those weaknesses on his team.
And honestly, you're going to be able to flip all those guys really based on the matchup too. A guy like Trey LeClaire may not necessarily play every week, but if you have a matchup where you can get in there and he's going to be able to get his shots in, then you bring him in. And I'm going to be interested. That's something I'm going to be interested to follow, is how these defenses fare. It's always those first couple weeks of a season really are some of the highest scoring weeks, going back PLL and MLL, and then defenders kind of get used to everything. So I'm interested to see how that kind of fares out in week 1, week 2, week 3.
Defenders getting used to things, goalies seeing the ball a little better, but we're very excited to see how Coach Bates and Coach Kavanaugh decide to use Connor Fields, kind of going back to our original conversation there, how they decide to use Connor Fields and the other pieces here on offense. As like we said, it could be for Fields, especially as a midfielder out of the box, along with today's guest, Tom Schreiber, who's led his midfield unit the past 2 seasons with the likes of Ryan Ambler, Christian Mazzone, Joey Sankey, and second-round entry draft selection Ryan Mcnamara. They're also joined by Trey LeClaire, as we just brought up, out of Ohio State, and then Jeff Trainer out of UMass in April's college draft, leaving no room for 2018 Princeton grad Austin Sims, or at least on your roster, a former player under Bates at Princeton, and then Nate Solomon, who was picked up after the entry draft off the waivers. No room for him either on your roster. You left both of them out. But how do you expect this offensive midfield to come together with all these moving pieces and all the pieces that you have here as you bring in Connor Fields? He can play attacking midfield. Joey Sankey has proved throughout his career with the Archers that he can play both attack and in a midfield hybrid role. Trey LeClaire has also played attack this season at Ohio State. So a lot of flexibility with these offensive pieces. How do you expect it to all come together?
Well, you just named it with our guest coming up, and that is the quarterback, Tom Schreiber. He's going to get everybody in order. Excuse me. He's going to be able to he's going to be the guy that's making the calls there. He's going to get everybody lined up. He's going to be the guy that finds the matchup, finds the crease guy, figures out who's getting the slide, who's getting what. I mean, obviously that's part of the coaching staff, but Schreiber's that guy on the field. He's going to kind of be the guy, especially early on in week 1. He might have to take over some of these games just while they're getting used to things. So I expect Tom Schreiber to bring this offense along on his back throughout the year and kind of play his leadership skill is going to really come to fruition as they get things straightened out.
The Archers looking like one of the top teams heading into 2021, led by that man, Tom Schreiber, reloaded following a few offseason moves and the drafts. Currently slotted as the team with the 4th best odds to win the 2021 championship, as they are tied with Chrome at plus 500 odds for a team with Tom Schreiber, Grant Ament, and Connor Fields, among the other talent they have offensively and defensively that we just spent some time talking about. Not bad at all, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm going to go ahead and say this I'm going to have 2 predictions here. I'll say that Connor Fields, not naming him comeback player of the year yet, but he's definitely going to be on the list
in that conversation.
And then I'll say that the Archers are definitely going to at least make it to the semifinal.
Okay.
I don't see how they missed the playoffs this year. This team is just way too talented, and they have too many veteran leaders, too many guys that they're not going to take this no playoff shit for an answer. There's no way. I find it very hard to believe that a team with Tom Schreiber, Will Manning, Marcus Holman, Dominique Alexander, and Mark McNeil are just going out with a poor regular season. Things would have to go as bad as this Colonial Pipeline thing in order for them to not make the playoffs. They'll be in there, buddy.
The Archers over the past 3 seasons have been over the past 2 seasons, have been one of the top 3 teams, pretty much, I think, and most people would argue, in the league. If you look back at 2019, they were, I believe, the 3 or the 4 seed, and then they lost in that first round and then ended up winning their next 2 games, got that first.
And that's like they're 5-5 compared to the Atlas' 5-5. Like, that was flip-flop.
Oh, yeah.
Their 5-5 was like, we're a good team. 5-5, we're on the ups compared to the Atlas in 2019 was 5-5, and we're going the other way. But that's a different conversation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, they're one of those teams that has always been right up there, and I would expect them to finally take that hump to get to at least the semifinal this year.
Absolutely. They got to the semifinal this past year in the tournament, so trying to repeat that success and maybe even get beyond that and get to that championship game. So definitely something that we will watch. Very excited to watch as we get into the 2021 season. Jordan, I want to appreciate you joining me, my man, as we look ahead to training camp in the 2021 season. We're very excited as we're exactly 2 weeks away from training camp and 3 weeks away from the start of the season. Very exciting stuff as we get closer and closer to June 4. But that is going to do it for today's show here of Goal Line Extended. I want to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you are not already, make sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube as well as on whatever podcast platform that you use. You can also head on over to lacrosseflash.com. All of our podcasts are there, as well as Jordan's Archers season preview. Make sure to check that out and keep your eyes open for our other team previews that we will be rolling out in the next few weeks. You can also follow Goal Line Extended on Instagram and Twitter at GL Extended. All the links that you will need will be in the description of the video or podcast that you are viewing or listening to right now. We will be back on Tuesday to look back on these results for the first round of the NCAA championship, and we will be looking ahead to quarterfinal weekend, and we'll also have another team and guest as we continue our PLL team previews ahead of the 2021 PLL season. I hope you all have an incredible weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at GL Extended, and subscribe to the show on any of your favorite podcast outlets. You can find Lacrosse Flash on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and online at lacrosseflash.com.